Hi and welcome to November 2021 Patreon rewards video. So today I am going to share very few drawings, and I will very quickly sum up what my intentions were. So beginning with Tifa. So the one of the reasons why I'm sharing very few drawings today for this month is because these paintings took a very long time to do. It took me about 40 hours. It took me most of the month. It took me half a month to do one painting and half a month to do another one. I mean, it was just, they're very time consuming. So the goal of these paintings were just to test my skill level on imaginative drawing. So the process for both the paintings that I'm going to share is like this. It's very, I came up with the idea, I sketched it out, I did the poses out of my imagination. Then I went in and using CG programs, I posed out the CG doll, and then I lit it. And the reason I posed out the CG doll was in order to light it so that I could paint it, because it's just that much easier when you have lighting reference to just use that. So, and then I would go and then I would redraw my final drawing using the CG model as a semi-guide, but then I would push my drawing so that it was even more exaggerated than the model. But I would still use the lighting. Now, the drawback with doing anything that has to do with CG models is that CG models are dolls, right? They are not human beings. They are not real skin. They are often opaque, and the thing about skin is that it's translucent. There's bone and muscle and blood. There is this thing called subsurface scattering, when the light comes in and bounces around and comes out, and then it creates areas in darkness that are more bright and saturated than they would normally be in an opaque surface. And so there's complications, and that's one of the reasons why painting human beings and painting skin is difficult. Is because because of the subsurface scattering, on top of the translucency of the skin, on top of the bone, muscle, and fat that is visible because of the translucency on the skin. There's like a lot of color variation, a lot of saturation, a lot of subsurface scattering. There's like a lot of complexity. So what you do in order to fix that sort of thing and to understand that sort of thing is you paint from life, you paint from photo reference, you learn to paint from real things so that you can see how that works, so that when you do the imaginative stuff and your stuff starts looking very opaque and it looks like you're painting dolls, that you could add that extra information and knowledge that you learned. This is where it gets brighter. This is where the subsurface scattering works. This is where it's usually more yellow. This is where it's usually more blue. This is where it's usually more red. And then you put that into your painting that you're doing from imagination or from a CG model, and then it looks more natural. It feels better. So that's what I ended up doing for this, and one of the reasons I chose this subject is because she was once upon a time when I played Final Fantasy VII, out of the two, Aerith and Tifa, love triangle things. I actually prefer Tifa, but this is not from the Final Fantasy VII game that I played. This is from the remake, which I haven't played, and I will not play because I don't have the time. So, but I like the new costume, and I wanted to give it a try, and I hadn't drawn her before, so I just thought I'd give it a go. And so this is what I ended up doing, and this was really, really fun. It was very, very challenging, and it has a slightly less light and dark dramatic. The lighting in it is not as stark and dramatic as I tend to do, so it was a fun little challenge. These sketches that I'm also posting are from a video that I posted on anatomy drawing, which, if it hasn't been posted yet, it will be. And if it has been posted yet, then you can search for it in my channel. but I'm going to talk about anatomy and studying anatomy. And these are the drawings that I did for that. And this is the second painting that I did. And again, same exact process. Sketched out the drawing, got a CG model. Then I started painting and then I started drawing, and then I redrew my stuff based on the CG models, and then I exaggerated the pose of the CG. So it's a little bit more back and forth, and then I lit the CG models. So then I used the lighting for the CG models to be able to paint this, except for her cowl. My CG model didn't obviously have a hood, so I had to invent that lighting. And then so like the back one is actually lit really quite dramatically. There's almost only one light source, and then the dark areas have a definitive termination. It's very clear where the light and shadows are, so it was much easier to do than this one. This one was far more difficult. This figure here was really, really tough for me. And this area here and this area here were the problem areas. So one of the things that I did, and the idea behind this was that I wanted to have the light come over her shoulder to light the book that she's reading, because that's what you would do if you had a book that you were reading. The thing is that it creates this really soft over the shoulder light that doesn't really have a lot of dramatic hard light termination and the type of lighting that I'm really used to. When you see my postcard, you're going to see the very dramatic lighting. There's just light and dark and boom, and there's a termination, a very clear termination between where the light starts and dark ends. What I'm not used to is having an extremely subtle transition between light and dark, especially on the face, which is so full of planes. And so one of the things that actually helped, because I was really lost and I was struggling with this head, was a course, an oil painting course that I saw Steve Houston teach. And one of the things that he did in his oil painting course was, when he was talking about portraits and he was talking about painting heads, is that in oil, like he said, that, like, you know, the egg, like a head is like an egg, and you could light the egg like this. And then he drew a head, and it was blank. There was no features. And then he just painted it, and it transitioned like an egg. And then after he had done that transition, he went in and added features and planes of the head, so that on top of that round foundation, that gradient, he created a gradient first before he actually put the head features on. And that's a really interesting thing to do, especially you can do that with oil. In digital, it's a little bit different. You could do exactly the same thing at any time. But so I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that thing. Instead of breaking all the head space and the head shape the way that I'm used to doing with the Terminator, very clearly breaking up the heads of the planes of the head, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a round egg shape, and then I'm going to paint the features on top of that very subtly. And sure enough, that worked. And so you could see that there's a gradient egg shape here, and then it just transitions. It's just round. And all I did was just add a teeny tiny little bit of light here, a very clear sharp line here, and then the nose is very, very subtle. It's just like another little egg in there, right? And then the eyes, I didn't even really do a whole lot of anything in here. Maybe I put a little bit of shadow in here, like almost like mascara or whatever. And then here I really added a lot of dark, but it was saturated dark. You could kind of see that there's some saturation, there's some brightish colors in here, even though it's dark. And that worked, and that helped. And I was like, okay, whew, that was a good lesson to learn. And then here, this area was also troublesome. And part of the reason why it was troublesome is because I was using CG models. CG models break when you turn their heads. So I had two different programs with two different CG models that I basically posed out. And then what I ended up doing was, when I turned the head on the darn CG models, the first one that I used, the head literally like the bone of the neck, when I turned a little x-axis or whatever the axis is, It just and it like the bone of the neck popped out, and the CG it was unusable. I couldn't use this area as any kind of lighting guide in any way, shape, or form. It just stunk. And on top of that, like the neck was all distorted, like this whole area of the, because of the CG model. That's just not what it was made for. So I used a different type of program. I used a different CG model, and that one worked way better, except for the fact that it still morphed all the neck muscles. So it's I did all the, and then it was like, and then like they all kind of twisted and go. That's not how real necks work. It's just they don't warp like that. So I'm like, oh, this is terrible. What am I gonna do? Okay, let me give you some advice, and then tell you what not to do. Don't do what I ended up doing, spending hours looking for reference online of people with their necks turned, so I could look at what their shoulders and necks are doing. Don't do that. I ended up finding some, and it was helpful, and yay, hooray. But you know what? Don't do that. Why? Because there's an easier way to have done it. All I had to do was put on a tank top, or just take my shirt off, or whatever, light myself, take a picture. That's it. That's all I had to do. Was just go, just look at my, just do the thing, poke, and then take a picture, see how it worked. That's it. Hours online when I could have just used myself as the reference, and it would have taken me 5 minutes. Maybe if the problem was the lighting, I could have just like found some lights and then done it. That would have taken 10 minutes instead of hours looking online. So please don't do what I did. Use yourself as reference. I did exactly that for the hand. I was able to take my picture of my own hand to draw the hand. I don't know why I bothered to spend hours looking for reference online when all I had to do was take a picture of my own neck turning. It's just really dumb not to have done that. All right, so those are some tips just in case you're curious about what something looks like. You are the model. You could use yourself, and then it'll make it much easier. All right, so okay, so here's the postcard for this month. And the winner of this postcard is Helena Ross. Helena Ross, congratulations. If you didn't know, by the way, if you're watching these kinds of videos for the first time, all my patrons, every single one, no matter what level you're a patron at, will get a high-res digital copy of the postcard. Okay? Everybody, no matter what level. However, one person in one of my patrons, I draw your name out from a randomizer, and they get the original piece. I send it to you via mail. It's a postcard, so it's easy for me to mail. Even though sometimes I am super lazy and mail it off months late, but you get the postcard, the original postcard. So what's the story behind this postcard? The story behind this postcard is that the figure, when I first drew her, was too far to the left. Okay, so there was 3 solutions I could have done. The first solution was throw out the paper, start again. By maybe using a light box, I would redraw the face using a light box, just move her over where I wanted her, then throw out the original. Didn't want to do that. I don't want to waste my paper. Second thing I could have done, erase the drawing and then redraw the drawing. And I didn't want to do that because by erasing the drawing, I basically ruined the paper for watercolor. The fibers would come up. It would be a mess. I didn't want to do that. It would ruin the paper. So, third solution, work with it. Come up with an interesting solution to the problem. How can you fill that space? What can you come up with that makes it, that you could work with the mistake and use the mistake to make it better? And I've been kind of obsessing with cyberpunk art recently. So I thought, you know what? Let's make this a cyberpunk painting. I'm gonna add some like tubes and mechanisms coming in and coming into the back of her head and in her shoulders and stuff, and make it a little bit more of a cyberpunky thing. And then that's what I did. So that's why you've got like the tubes and things in coming into the darkness dramatically into her head. And I think it just made it that much better. It made it much more unique than I intended it to be. It also fits with the cyberpunk theme that I'm very into currently. I go in and out of cyberpunk obsession. Sometimes I'm just really into it, and sometimes I forget about it and then get obsessed with something else. And right now I'm in that. I'm right back into it. So this was really fun because I got to experiment and add an element of fantasy to what would have just been a traditional study. So Helena Ross, congratulations. And that's it for me. I hope this has been helpful. And again, just wanted to show you here really quick, point out the dramatic lighting, light, dark, light, dark. So this is a little bit more of what I'm used to as opposed to something a lot more subtle. And I want to learn and paint and keep practicing more subtle light than I'm used to, so that I could just increase my drawing skills. I did do a video of the making of this postcard. If you haven't seen it already, if it hasn't been published in my YouTube channel already, it will be soon. If you're looking at this in the future, it probably is already published, so you could see if you can find it on my channel. But if you're curious to see how I approached and did this painting. But that's it from me. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. And I hope you learned a little something. I hope I said something that was really interesting. And really quick, next month I was planning to, or rather this month, I don't know. In the month of November, I was planning to do a whole lot of CG work. I was planning to do a lot of CG sculpting or actual physical sculpting. I'm going to probably do that in the future, but because of circumstances at work that I'm probably going to be talking about next month, I gotta practice drawing Simpsons more. So I am going to be, next month is going to be kind of a bit of a Simpsons month. You guys are going to get some of my Simpsons studies. So look forward to that next month. All right, so talk to you next time. All right, bye.